Viet Lai Chot Wa. ChatGPT said. In the heart of Charlotte, North Carolina, Jonathan John Mercer was a man of quiet demeanor and unassuming presence. As the CEO of Mercer Auto Group, overseeing 137 employees, John preferred to stay out of the limelight. On this particular morning, he dressed inconspicuously in worn jeans, scuffed sneakers, and a Carolina Panthers cap pulled low over his brow. Driving his black 2011 Honda Accord, he parked a block away from the dealership that bore his family's name. Today wasn't about appearances, it was about understanding the true state of his business. The Mercer Auto Group dealership had long been a pillar of integrity in the community. However, recent whispers hinted at a decline in customer satisfaction. A woman from Huntersville mentioned being sold an extended warranty she barely comprehended. A family from Matthews discovered discrepancies between their agreed-upon monthly payment and the actual charges. Individually, these incidents seemed minor, but collectively, they painted a troubling picture. As John approached the dealership, the familiar signage gleamed under the morning sun. Mercer Auto Group, emblazoned across pristine glass. Taking a deep breath, he stepped inside. The scent of fresh coffee mingled with the unmistakable aroma of new cars. A bell chimed overhead, but no one looked up. John observed the scene. Two salesmen engaged in animated conversation by the water cooler, the receptionist engrossed in her phone, and customers meandering without guidance. His first stop was the service bay. The technicians were hard at work, their focus evident. Satisfied, John moved to the customer waiting area. A man flipped through a magazine while his young daughter played on a tablet with a cracked screen. No one approached John, offered assistance, or even acknowledged his presence. Wandering over to the row of Camrys by the glass wall, he overheard a conversation. A middle-aged couple listened as a salesman spoke rapidly, his tone bordering on aggressive. "Sir, you won't find a better deal. This one's under warranty, barely used. But we need to act today to lock in this price." John frowned. High-pressure tactics were never part of the Mercer ethos. Turning a corner near the used inventory office, John's attention was drawn to a young woman, possibly in her late 20s. She wore a thin jacket, and a baby rested in a carrier against her chest. In her hand, she clutched a worn envelope, likely containing pay stubs or bank statements. The salesman before her, clad in a navy blazer, exuded confidence, perhaps too much. "You're getting full coverage for the first 3 years," the salesman assured her. "Bumper to bumper, plus powertrain. If anything breaks, even the air conditioning, it's covered." John's ears perked up. That wasn't accurate. He had personally revised those contracts to ensure transparency. The salesman continued. "The $895 fee I mentioned? Standard across all deals. It covers a full pre-delivery inspection, interior cleaning, and anti-theft VIN etching." John's heart sank. VIN etching had been discontinued from their services 3 years prior. This wasn't just a miscommunication, it was a blatant misrepresentation. Stepping back to remain unseen, John's disappointment deepened. This was his business, his name on the line, and here was an employee misleading a customer who appeared to be stretching every dollar. But John needed to see how far this would go before intervening. Positioning himself near the finance office, he continued to eavesdrop. The young woman nodded hesitantly at the salesman's words, her grip tightening on the envelope. The baby squirmed, letting out a soft whimper, but she remained focused, likely calculating the financial implications. The salesman leaned in, lowering his voice. "Don't worry about the credit check. I know how to work the system. We'll get you into something today, even if we have to be creative." She hesitated, her eyes darting toward the exit. Sensing her apprehension, the salesman pressed on, his tone reassuring yet insistent. John clenched his jaw. This wasn't just about one dishonest employee. It was indicative of a deeper cultural issue within the dealership. Deciding it was time to act, John stepped forward, his voice calm yet authoritative. "That doesn't sound like the protection plan we offer." The salesman blinked, taken aback. The young woman turned toward John, surprise evident on her face. "Excuse me," the salesman responded, attempting to regain his composure. John repeated, "The plan you're describing doesn't exist in our offerings." Sizing John up, the salesman challenged, "Do you work here?" "In a manner of speaking," John replied. Before the situation could escalate, the general manager, a man named Jeff Lawson, appeared, his eyes wide with recognition. "Mr. Mercer?" The salesman's face paled. The realization of John's identity rendered him speechless. Turning to the young woman, John's tone softened. "I'm sorry. This isn't how we treat our customers. Not here, not under my name." Addressing Jeff, John instructed. We need a conference room. Jeff Lawson, still red in the face, nodded quickly and gestured toward a corridor at the back of the showroom. Without another word, John turned to the young woman and said gently, "Please come with me. I want to make this right." She hesitated, adjusting the baby in her arms, then followed him silently. As they passed through the showroom, the once busy floor went still. Conversations faded, phones stopped ringing, and several employees peeked over their cubicles, whispering. Trevor, the young lot attendant who had offered John help earlier that day, stood near the entrance. He met John's eyes briefly, then looked down. No one else said a word. Inside the glass-walled conference room, John held the door open and offered the woman a chair. She eased into it slowly, the baby carrier set beside her. Jeff entered next, clearly nervous. The salesman, whose name tag now clearly read Connor Gates, followed last. His confident swagger had thinned but hadn't vanished. John didn't sit. Instead, he took the folder from Connor's hands, opened it, and spread the quote sheet across the table. Using a pin from the holder, he began circling numbers. "Explain these," he said, his tone quiet but firm. Connor bristled. "I don't see why I'm being grilled. These are standard." "Explain them," John repeated, sharper this time. Connor glanced at Jeff, hoping for backup. Jeff stayed quiet, his eyes locked on the table. "Well," Connor said after a pause, "those are standard dealership fees. Everybody includes them." John raised an eyebrow. "Everybody who?" "It's in the system," Connor insisted. "No, it isn't," John shot back. "I helped rewrite that system 2 years ago." "That finetching fee?" "We discontinued that in 2022. Powertrain coverage?" "Limited to 5 years. Not full coverage, like you told her." "And this woman," John turned slightly, nodding at her, "walked in here hoping to buy a safe car for her and her baby. And you added over $2,000 in made-up charges." The young woman, who had been silent, blinked rapidly. Her hand trembled slightly on the carrier's handle, but she said nothing. John continued. "You told her $349 per month. That only works with a down payment you didn't mention. And even then, the interest rate you quoted is inflated by at least 2.5 points. Connor stood straighter, trying to find footing. "Look, I've hit every target. I've moved more cars than anyone else. My customers leave happy." John leaned in. "They leave confused, pressured, lied to. That's not salesmanship, that's manipulation." Jeff finally spoke, voice cracking with tension. "John, I didn't know he was doing all this. I swear." "That's exactly the problem," John snapped. "You didn't know because you weren't paying attention. You cared about numbers. I cared about people." The woman stood, clutching her baby. "I thought this place was different," she said, softly but with heat in her voice. "I really did. It was supposed to be," John said. "And I'm sorry it wasn't." He reached into his pocket and pulled out a business card. "This is my direct number. If you still want the car, I'll personally make sure you get it. Fair price, no garbage. And someone else will handle the paperwork." She took the card carefully, nodding. "Thank you." Then John turned back to Connor. "Clean out your desk," he said. "You're done here." Connor scoffed. "Come on, John. No negotiation. You knew better. You just didn't care." Connor muttered under his breath and stormed out. John looked at Jeff. "You and I are going to have a longer conversation in 10 minutes. Then he turned to the woman again. "Let me walk you to the lobby." As they left the conference room, the hush returned. Employees glanced up and quickly looked away. No one spoke. At the front desk, John stopped. The receptionist, who had barely acknowledged anyone earlier, looked up as he approached. "Did you greet her when she walked in?" John asked. The woman hesitated, chewing her gum. I don't remember." "Start remembering," John said. "Or start looking for another job." But he knew firing one man or scolding one receptionist wouldn't fix what had been broken. Later, in Jeff's office, John stared out at the dealership floor through the blinds. The hum of business had returned, soft conversations, phones ringing, but something in the air had changed. Jeff walked in slowly, shoulders slumped. "I didn't know," he said again. "But you knew something," John replied. "You knew complaints were rising, that deals were getting more aggressive, that customer satisfaction dropped, and you blamed surveys." "I figured the industry was shifting," Jeff offered. "More competition." "The industry didn't change," John said. "We did." He stood and turned to face Jeff. "We stopped seeing people as people, started seeing them as quotas. And that's not what I built." Jeff swallowed. "So what happens now?" "We clean house. I want every deal from the last 90 days reviewed. Refund anything that wasn't fully explained. And every salesperson gets a one-on-one with me. I want to know how they were trained, what they were told to push, and who else is selling fiction." Jeff nodded slowly. "And one more thing," John added. "I want Trevor in my office next week." Jeff blinked. "The kid in the lot. He's the only one who looked a customer in the eye today. That matters." There was a knock at the door. The receptionist peeked in, looking sheepish. "Mr. Mercer, Miss Ellis is still in the lounge. She's waiting for a ride." "Get her a bottle of water," John said, "and put her in the private lounge. Not the plastic chairs by the vending machine. Treat her like someone who matters." She nodded and disappeared. John stepped out onto the showroom floor. A few employees glanced up, then down. In the far corner, Monique Ellis sat beside the carrier, her daughter asleep. She looked emotionally exhausted. John approached gently. "I know this was a lot. I've been through worse," she said, smiling faintly. "That doesn't mean you should have had to go through this," John replied. She finally met his eyes. "Why did you come in dressed like that?" He smiled. "Because people lie to the man in the suit." She chuckled. "Guess they do." He handed her a slim folder. "If you still want that Corolla, this is the real breakdown. No hidden fees. I had our finance manager run it personally, and we added a year of service, free of charge." She raised her brows. "Why?" "Because someone has to remind this place what it stands for." When her ride arrived, a silver hatchback with a missing hubcap, she stood, adjusted the baby carrier, and said, "Don't let them ruin what you built." "I won't." She walked out. But John knew it wasn't just Monique's trust that had to be rebuilt. It was the trust of everyone who walked through those doors. 3 days later, John returned, not in disguise, but in a tailored Navy suit. The entire staff was summoned to a mandatory all-hands meeting. Phones were rerouted. No sales would be processed before 11 a.m. They gathered in the break room, shoulder to shoulder. Trevor stood in the back, quiet but alert. Jeff sat near the front. John didn't use a mic. He didn't need one. "I started this company in 2004, he said, behind a barbecue joint in Murfreesboro. I sold 3 cars my first week and washed each one myself." A few chuckled softly. "I had 2 things, my name and my word. I never promised what I couldn't deliver. I never lied to close a deal." He paused. "But something changed. We let small compromises become normal. We pressured instead of listening. We treated people like numbers." He scanned the room. "If you've ever padded a fee because you thought no one would notice, if you've ever rushed someone out because you thought they couldn't pay, today's your wake-up call." A few shifted uneasily. "You have a choice. Help me fix this, or find another job. No in between." Trevor raised his hand. "What about the ones who did it right?" John smiled. "Then we start noticing." He handed Trevor a sealed envelope, a promotion. Lot attendant to junior sales associate, with training and benefits. "Are you serious?" Trevor asked. "As a heart attack." Things changed fast after that. 5 of Connor's deals were refunded. Monique's story became a training case study. Every manager went through a 3-week ethics course. John even brought back Arlene Cupp, former head of customer service, who'd quit 2 years earlier in frustration. She returned with fire, and her first move? A glass wall between sales and finance. No more deals behind closed doors. That Friday, John stood by the sedans, watching a young salesman kneel beside an elderly man, patiently explaining trim levels. That moment mattered more than any spreadsheet. Arlene joined him. "Looks like they remember who they work for." "They better," John said, "because I'm not going anywhere." But something still tugged at him. That Sunday, John sat on the porch of his late mother's house in Jackson, Tennessee. The sun had just crept over the hills. He sipped his coffee and pulled out an old photo. Him at 10, standing beside his mom in her rust-colored Oldsmobile. Her smile was wide, proud. It wasn't a new car, but it was hers. Paid for in full. No tricks. No lies. Just respect. That day had shaped everything he believed about dignity. Back at the dealership the next week, a new plaque was installed by the door. It read, "Treat every customer like they're buying their first car, with dignity, patience, and truth." Monique returned a month later for her first service check. She saw Trevor at the desk. "You remember me?" she asked. He smiled. "Silver Corolla, right? Runs good. Like a dream." They chatted, brief, genuine, respectful. John watched from his office. Because it was never about the money. It was always about the truth. And now, he was rebuilding it. One word, one handshake at a time.